Hi,
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Perfect. I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Great, great. So maybe let's just give it, a couple of seconds so people can join.
Absolutely.
Um, Usually people take a little bit longer. The way the algorithm works is that you start, and then Instagram sees that you're for real, that you're not just playing around, and then it starts to show more and more people.
Are you
But
sure you're for real? I mean, that's a deep philosophical question.
I know, but Instagram knows better than me. So
I guess so.
But welcome to Instagram. I know it's your first experience here. I hope other people invite you as well, and maybe one day you can have an account and have one more thing to worry
That's right. Yes, that's what I need.
about. Good. It's a great pleasure. Soon I'm gonna do the proper introduction so we can have
Okay.
something to start with.
Sounds good.
Um,
And I follow
you
your
know,
advice. I do have wine here, so
oh yeah, oh great. So I'm
oh
gonna
yeah,
pour myself some wine. You're Italian, so
exactly.
it's
It's
never too
slightly
early.
on the early side in New York, but it's okay. We can make an exception.
Great. So you're in New York, yeah?
Yes, I'm in Brooklyn, right at the entrance of the Brooklyn Bridge.
I went to boarding school in Dobbs Ferry, near Queens.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you study there?
Just high school. I was
High school. Okay. Yeah.
11th grade. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So some people arriving. We got 179 people already. So hello everybody. I'm going to speak a little bit of Portuguese. There's a lot of people who speak Portuguese.
Go for it.
And then
Yeah.
I'm get into it. Então, pessoal, a gente está aqui hoje com o Massimo Pigliucci. Essa conversa vai ser em inglês. Então, eu peço desculpas para aqueles que não entendem inglês, mas a partir de agora a gente vai apertar a tecla SAP. Welcome, friends. We're here today with Dr. Massimo Pigliucci, one of the world's foremost experts on Stoicism, an active contributor to teaching it, practicing it, and divulging it. Dr. Pigliucci has an amazing academic record. He's a PhD in biology and genetics and evolutionary psychology and in philosophy. He's a professor at City College of New York, former host of Rationally Speaking podcast, former editor of Scientia Salon magazine. He has authored many books and countless articles on all sorts of subjects. He was kind enough to grant me this amazing conversation we're about to have. So thank you, Massimo. One of the first things that I wanted to mention to you is that I listen to Stoic Meditations, your podcast, pretty much every day in the morning, and it's because you're kind enough to do so many of them that it's possible to listen every day, and really makes a difference. I really like to thank you. I mean, that's something. It makes a big difference, listening to the words and wisdom of the Stoics with your kind and generous voice, and
I'm glad to hear.
Insightful
I'm glad to hear.
explanations.
I'm happy to be here. That podcast actually started out because I do that exercise for myself every day, pretty much. I start my day by trying to focus on a particular Stoic quote that I pick pretty much at random from my collection, and then I take a few minutes to reflect on it and see how it applies to my life. And after a while that I was doing that, I figured, maybe other people might actually, find that thing useful. And so I started the podcast, and little did I know, it's got almost 5 million downloads. So it's like,
wow, really?
Apparently people do enjoy it.
That's a lot. Wow, 5 million. I actually tried to look that up before we started this, but I couldn't find where that marker is. Where you see that. Must be in your platform thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's the podcast is put out on the Anchor.fm platform. That gives me the statistics, but it's also available pretty much on all the major platforms, including Spotify and Apple, and etc. Yeah.
Oh, wait, is this? Yeah, I think this is Marcus Aurelius. Look.
Yeah, looks like Marcus.
I actually forgot I had him here. There he goes. I'm actually wearing also. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's a cufflink with Marcus Aurelius' coin from.
Nice.
It's a. Have you seen this before? It's amazing.
I've seen it, but I think I can do you one better. Let's see. Where is it?
Okay.
This, I don't know if you can see it. This is an actual Marcus Aurelius coin.
Oh, that's amazing.
This is from the year 180 when Marcus died. I have a small collection of Roman antiquities here. You see all that stuff there. It's actually Roman stuff. And this is my, let's see if I can show you there, right? This one is a lamp. It's a Roman lamp. It's an oil lamp.
Sure, yeah.
And it's from the, I should probably hold it like this. And it is from the same period as Epictetus, the early 2nd century Stoic philosopher. And the reason I got it is because there is a famous story about Epictetus' lamp that he talks about in his courses. So he says, last night I heard a sound in the other room, and I woke up and I went there, and my lamp was gone. A thief just stole it. And then he thought about it, and he said, well, I only lost the lamp, and tomorrow morning I can go to the market, get another one, a cheaper one, so that it's not that expensive. But the thief actually lost his own integrity in doing so, and he thinks he came out ahead by taking the lamp, but he actually lost in the bargain. So when I heard that story, there is a dealer of antiquity, of Roman and Greek antiquities here in New York, that I had bought a few things, like some of the coins and stuff like that before. And so I went there and said, hey, you don't happen to have a 2nd century Roman lamp, do you? And the guy said, yes, absolutely. So I called that my Epictetus lamp.
Who doesn't have a 2nd century Roman lamp? That's the most normal thing in the world. So as we were saying before, you're in New York and you're a professor at City College. How long have you been in New York?
Let's see. I moved to New York in 2006. I had been already in the United States for a while. I came to the United States in 1990, so I've been here about 30 years. But I moved to New York in 2006, and I was hired at the City University of New York 3 years later, and ever since I've been at CUNY in 2 different colleges. Right now I'm at City College, teaching philosophy, mostly philosophy of science, because my field is actually philosophy of science. But I also teach, like next semester, for instance, I'm teaching a course on practical ancient philosophy, where we're going to talk about Stoicism and epicureanism and things like that.
Which is just really philosophy, right? Because they just changed it. Practical ancient philosophy is what philosophy really is. Right?
That's right. The most of the ancient philosophy was in fact practical, although to be fair, not all of it, right? I mean, if you go back to the pre-Socratic philosophers, people like Heraclitus or Anaximander and so on, they were actually interested in what we would today call natural science and metaphysics.
Or metaphysics. Right? Yeah, but at the same time, we know, at least from when we hear these guys, Diogenes Laertius, things like that they were at the same time always practical philosophers. They were always interested in they were part of they had cults and people with diets and
that's right. Pythagoras. That's right. Pythagoras was the head of a cult, really, that had also dietary restrictions. Yeah, they were vegetarian. The reason that the Pythagoreans were vegetarian is because they believed in reincarnation, and they thought if you eat an animal, you're possibly eating your own grandfather or something like that. It's just like that's not a good idea.
That's pretty superstitious,
Yeah, it's a little bit on the superstitious side of things.
But who knows? Maybe they knew more.
Maybe they were right. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. So let's, since you got your wine there, let's do a cheers.
Absolutely. Here. Let's taste.
Thanks a lot for your accepting our invitation. And
it's a pleasure to be here.
To life, to Zeus.
Indeed.
So in the beginning of symposium, they choose how much they're gonna mix the wine with water. So I mixed a little bit here because it's too early, for getting too wild.
Yeah, I'm drinking some Vermentino from Sardinia. It's a fairly light wine, so it doesn't need water. But
okay. Great. So let me see here. I don't know where to start, to be honest, Massimo. You have so many things.
Wherever you like.
That we so many rabbit holes that we can go into here. So all right, let's start with like personal questions. How about why did you leave Italy? Did you feel like going back there at any point?
Yeah, I've been back to Italy every year, sometimes twice a year, since I moved to the United States. But the reason I left was to pursue my academic career, because Italy, especially at the time, but even today, frankly, wasn't exactly conducive to an academic career. Yes, we have universities, of course. In fact, technically, we have the oldest university in the world. The University of Bologna was established more than 900 years ago, before Oxford and Paris. But it is difficult to get into an academic career in Italy, especially at the time, because I started out as a biologist and not as a philosopher, and as you mentioned earlier, and positions in biology departments at the university in Italy were very few and far in between. And besides, I figured that I really needed some kind of international experience. So I applied for a grant and I moved to the United States. I went to the University of Connecticut, and that's where I did my PhD in evolutionary biology. So that was the original, reason for moving. Initially, the idea wasn't necessary to stay permanently, but then one thing leads to another, and here we are 30 years later.
So you began in a sort of like straight, more exact sciences, and then you started slowly getting interested in well, there's evolutionary psychology was a gateway drug, probably to harder things, right? To afterwards you got interested in philosophy. I heard you say in an interview that you started getting interested in virtue ethics because you were going. As you know, my father passed away quite recently, and I heard. Thank you. I heard that when you started getting into virtue ethics, it was because your own father had passed away, and he found sort of a guide. Is that correct?
That's right. That's correct. I mean, I'd already shifted academic field. I was already studying philosophy and was getting my PhD in philosophy, and then midlife crisis hit, and midlife crisis wasn't anything unusual. It happens to a lot of people, but a number of unusual things did happen about at the same time. So my father died of cancer, and my wife at the time divorced me unexpectedly. I didn't see it coming. People typically people expect that kind of stuff. But
by the way, I actually got divorced this year as well. So we're in a similar
exactly. And then I also changed job, moved to a different city. I had to buy a new house and all that sort of stuff. Wow. Now, any psychologist would tell you that one or two of those things are sufficiently stressful. If four or five happen at the same time, they're like, "Oh, okay, come on now. The universe is trying to tell me something."
Massimo, you won't believe this, but the same exact thing. I until the end of last year, I was living in Israel. So I spent 3 years living in Israel, and I had 2 children there. And I moved to Brazil in the end of last year with my family, and then I got divorced, and then I left. Well, I joined a company from Israel that when I came back here I was part of, and I left that February this year. So basically the same story. I changed my job. I moved countries. I lost my father. I lost my wife. Well, I got divorced. And does that cover all the boxes?
That pretty much covers it. Yeah, that pretty much covers it. Right. So you know what I'm talking about. When you're in that kind of situation, it's a little bit of a crisis. It's kind of inevitable.
Right. You need something to guide you, right? To hold on to.
Yeah, exactly. You need some kind of framework. And interestingly, I thought I had a framework, but it turns out it wasn't particularly useful. So let me go back for a second here. When I was younger, I grew up in Italy, in Rome, and naturally I was Catholic because that's what happens if you live.
That's what you do there.
Yeah, if you live literally next to the Pope, then that's the thing. But I left the church when I was a teenager because, frankly, there were a lot of things that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, like, for instance, I still remember having a conversation with my priest and one day, and it was about the Catholic dogma of transubstantiation. So this notion that when you take communion, right, you literally drink the blood of Christ and literally eat the flesh of Christ. And I said, you don't mean literally, do you? I mean, you mean metaphorically. Sure, I can understand the symbolism, but you don't actually mean literally. And then the guy said, no, I mean literally. It's a metaphysics. It's a miracle. It's like a metaphysics. It's like, no, it isn't. It's like, no, that's not happening. So that and a lot of other things didn't make any sense. And so I said, okay, fine. When I left the church, because people, frankly, do need some kind of framework. They do need some kind of general overview of life, some kind of
some system
guidance. Yes, some system. Then when you leave religion, you look for something else. And in my case, I adopted the philosophy of secular humanism. And secular humanism is, fairly popular across the world. I had read about it. I said, okay, this sounds good. It has a lot of ideas that I enjoy. Like, it's secular humanists support, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. It's all about justice and okay, fine, sure. I'm good. However, when the crisis hit, turns out that secular humanism was pretty much useless because believing in human rights doesn't actually help you getting through a divorce.
Right.
Believing
it's something more external, right?
Yeah. Believing that justice is important, which it is, still doesn't actually help you with grief when your father is dying and that sort of stuff. So that's what I actually started looking more in a more concerted way, in a more focused way about a possible philosophy of life. And you're right, that almost immediately I hit on virtue ethics. Before I got to virtue ethics, actually, I tried Buddhism for a little bit. And I read a little bit about Buddhism. I tried meditation, that sort of stuff. Meditation was actually helpful. It was calming, and it was like an interesting way to center yourself. The problem is that Buddhism didn't speak to me, for one thing, because the language is not the one that I'm used to. Yeah, the culturally is not the one that I'm used to, and so that's my limitation, of course, not Buddhism's problems.
Right.
But the other thing is the metaphysics was not exactly.
Yeah, I find a lot of problems as well with Buddhism, because it's the practice, especially in Zen Buddhism, it's much more stoic, much more rational, much more relaxed. But in general, like if you look back at the Dhammapada, the original text and stuff, there is a lot of it's actually quite similar to Christianity, to be honest. There's a lot of sort of suddenly you have to fast and you have to there's certain things that you're obliged to do, and there's no actual explanation for it other than that's what you do, and that's what the Buddha is subscribing to. Right?
And the metaphysics certainly did not agree with me. I mean, if we're talking about karma and reincarnation and things like that, I said, no, wait a minute. I left the Catholic Church precisely because of that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to go back to it. So So it struck me that virtue ethics, which is a general approach developed in ancient Greece and Rome, that is focused more on character development, on becoming a better person by practicing a better character. So in other words, by mindfully engaging in positive actions that little by little change your entire persona in a sense. So I said, okay, that sounds good. The first stop, if you go to virtue ethics, if you get into virtue ethics, then the first stop usually is Aristotle. So I started studying Aristotle. The problem with Aristotle was that the guy was really an aristocrat. I mean, not surprisingly, because he grew up. His father was the personal physician of the king of Macedon. He eventually became the advisor and mentor of Alexander the Great. So it's like, so the guy literally was an aristocrat. And now that's not necessarily a problem unless you become, it makes it so that your entire philosophy becomes aristocratic. For instance, Aristotle said that in life it's important to work on your character, to develop, to practice virtue. I'm on board with that. But then he also said, you also need, in order to have a good life, life flourishing, you also need a little bit of education, Okay, you need health, you need a little bit of wealth, you also need good looks. And I said, okay, that's it, I'm done, I'm screwed. I can't do with that sort of stuff. And it's very, it's that definition of the good life basically excludes a lot of people, either because they don't have the good looks, or because they're not wealthy, or because they're not educated.
Although, I mean, in their defense, when they say good look, I don't think they mean what we tend to, a good look. I think it's a healthy body, is sort of looking, presenting externally. That's my take. I don't know. Obviously, you're the one.
True. But then again, Socrates, for instance, would hardly qualify. He literally had bulgy eyes and a big nose.
Yeah.
He was known to be ugly. He was well known for being ugly.
But let's explore that further, because I think I really, because Aristotle, Corpus Aristotelicum, or however you say it, is such a vast encyclopedia of works that I tend to believe that the Lyceum was something that happened over a few generations, and with students, and like we see any corpus of a sect or a school or a religion or something like that, as the leadership changes, and as people add to it, so I don't quite, like when they say Aristotle, I don't think a guy, I think a school of thought,
No, you're right. It was a school of thought, and absolutely, and different people, different students of Aristotle had different opinions about things. Just like in Stoicism. And Stoicism is not just Zeno of Citium, who's the guy that established the thing. It's a bunch of different people with different ideas. However, I actually read the Nicomachean Ethics, which is Aristotle, and so I said, okay, well, that's interesting, but no, it's not going to be for me. So then the next stop was Epicurus. Because Epicureanism also is a type of virtual ethics. Now, Epicureans, as you probably know, have a sort of a little bit of a bad reputation, right? They're supposed to be the sex, drugs, and rock and roll of philosophy. But in fact, they were not. Epicurus thought that the kind of pleasure that he was talking about was very simple pleasures. There was an emphasis on simple food and simple living, and also an emphasis on friendship. I said, okay, well, I'm on board with that one. That's fine. He was also very open to women. He was one of the few ancient philosophers that allowed women in his school.
I see them as like a sort of like Woodstock sort of guys.
Right.
There is sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but not necessarily. There were a lot of people who lived out in the woods and woke up early and sunbathed, and
Exactly. So it's like, okay, I'm on board so far. But then the problem is that, according to Epicurus, the highest goal in life is to live a life without pain, not just physical pain, but emotional pain, mental pain. And because of that, he thought that you need to stay away from social and political involvement, because, as we know, it's pretty painful. Right. I mean, just pay attention. Just read the news these days, both in Brazil and in the United States, and you'll see that it's pretty painful stuff going on. And I said, okay, well, but that's not going to do it for me, because I don't think that I could live a good life as a human being if I did not have a significant degree of social and political involvement. So that was out. So here I was, right in the middle of my midlife crisis, looking around Buddhism, Aristotelianism, Epicureanism, blah, blah, blah. And one day on Twitter, of all places, I see this thing that says, help us celebrate Stoic Week. I said, what the hell is Stoic Week? And why would anybody want to celebrate the Stoics? Because at the time, my notion of Stoicism was the typical view that people have often of the Stoics as people who live through their life with a stiff upper lip, enduring everything and suppressing emotions and things like that. So it's a little bit like Mr. Spock from Star Trek, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the Spartans and samurai, Spartans, Stoics.
Yeah, right, samurai. So I thought, okay, well, as much as I love Spock as a character, I don't think I want to live my life like that. So it's like weird. But then I thought about it for a second. I said, wait a minute. The Stoics said that's Marcus Aurelius. And Marcus Aurelius, I actually read the Meditations when I was in college, and I thought, okay, that was an interesting read. And then I remember the Stoics, it's also Seneca. Seneca, I actually translated from Latin when I was in high school, and I found him an interesting, engaging writer. So I said, okay, well, maybe I should take a look at this Stoicism stuff before dismissing it. I should take a look.
Did he write originally in Latin or in Greek?
Seneca wrote in Latin. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Greek. Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus wrote in Greek. But Seneca and Cicero, who also wrote a lot about Stoicism, they were in Latin. And I translated in both of them as sort of exercises in high school. All right, so I said, well, let's take a look. What the hell? I mean, how bad can it be? It's just a week, right? So let me sign up for Stoic Week, which, by the way, is coming up again sometime in mid-October.
Soon. Yeah,
it's very soon.
17th October.
That's right. And so I signed up, and I downloaded some material, and I started reading and then practicing because they have some exercises. So the first thing that I thought was good was that, good, the Stoics have exercises, right? They have types of meditations, they have stuff that they do. So I need something practical here. So that was welcome. And then the first guy that I read, the first ancient Stoic that I read in this sort of new phase was Epictetus. And Epictetus was an early 2nd century Stoic philosopher, late 1st century, early 2nd century. He was a slave initially for part of his life. He was brought to Rome by the secretary to Emperor Nero. Then eventually, because he was a bright guy, he was allowed to study philosophy, and he was freed. He was made a freedman, and he studied his own school. He got himself into trouble by speaking truth to power, as we would say today, because he was critical of the emperor Domitian. Right. And so the emperor just sent him out into exile in northwestern Greece, in the city of Nicopolis. And Epictetus went there, reestablished his school, and became one of the most famous school of antiquity. So I started reading Epictetus, right? And one of the first things that I read is like this passage in the Discourses where he says, so we should give some thought about death and how we're going to die and that sort of stuff. However, it doesn't look like I'm dying today. On the other hand, I'm hungry. And so I think we should think about lunch right now and not about dying. And I said, okay, this guy is funny. I like him. He's sense of humor, sometimes borderline sarcasm. He's very in your face. He's very practical. Yeah. He's very,
and because he's a slave, he's like he doesn't have anything to lose, and he has that spirit, right? Like I can take it all the way, but also I can scold you as well because you have it all, and I have nothing. And actually, for myself as well, Epictetus was the first one that actually. If you read Marcus Aurelius, if you read Seneca, you don't necessarily get like a corpus of stoicism. You get like advice, and you see that I think Epictetus is where you find all of it in one place. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. In the Discourses, especially. That's right.
And speaking of which, you're just to take advantage of the fact that you're mentioning. Epictetus, you're releasing a book. Have you released it yet? A field guide to a happy life.
Yes, it came out a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
Oh, great. So I just want to say to everyone who's watching or listening, two things. First of all, please buy, download, whatever, a guide to a happy life. Field guide to a happy life by Massimo Pigliucci. It's available probably on Amazon. Yeah. Yes. And all good places.
All the major retailers. Yes.
Yeah, that's how you say it. Because I'm not used to doing this in English, by the way. This is the first time I'm doing it.
I believe it. I apologize. My Portuguese is really not that good.
My Italian is only good when I drink the whole bottle of wine, so that's not going to work. But also, like, if anybody wants to ask questions, there's going to be a little question mark over here, just right next to the comments section. Because we have so many people, we can't really answer the questions that are on the feed. We have to answer the questions that are official. So please ask questions over there. So tell me about this A Field Guide to a Happy Life. What's different between this book and How to Be a Stoic, and a handbook for new Stoics that you have.
Those are the three books. Yeah, those are the three books that I wrote about Stoicism so far. So, How to Be a Stoic is the first one that came out back in 2017, and it's How to Be a Stoic. It's an overview of Stoic philosophy. It's like, if you don't know anything about Stoic philosophy, I think it's an introduction. It's a decent introduction that doesn't require any philosophical background. It also has a practical component because each chapter is about a different issue, such as, death, for instance, or depression, or career, and things like that. So it's a fairly practical, general introduction to Stoicism. The second book, Handbook for New Stoics, I co-wrote with my friend Greg Lopez, and that one is a very, very practical guide. The emphasis there is definitely on the practice. In fact, it's essentially all exercises. It's 52 exercises that people can sample and see if Stoic practice is for them. They don't have to do, of course, all 52 of them. In fact, with Greg, we provide a little bit of a shortcut. We say, if you're just starting, these are the more fundamental exercises you want to try out and see if they make a difference. The publisher was actually very good there. They put together a book where you can literally write in your notes and make it sort of your companion while you're exploring Stoicism. And if you bought the electronic version, the publisher actually makes available downloadable forms that you can use to actually work with the book. This new one, A Field Guide to a Happy Life, it's quite a different conception. So first of all, it's a very short book, as you probably noticed, and it's meant to be portable. I can show you the English, as in the UK edition. This is it, right? And as you can see, it's very, very thin. It's a very small book. And the notion there is, it's an interesting project. It was an interesting project for me. So one of the early Stoic texts, one of the most important Stoic texts, was Epictetus' Enchiridion. Enchiridion just means manual. So it's a manual for a happy life, manual for a good life. And the Enchiridion is essentially a little book that is divided into 53 sections. Each section is just a few sentences or a few paragraphs long, so it's very short. And it gives you practical advice on all sorts of different aspects of life, according to Epictetus. Now, this book was really fundamental for a lot of people throughout the centuries. Not only Epictetus was very famous, of course, in antiquity, but during the Middle Ages, for instance, Christian monks used the Enchiridion as a training manual for their practices. So it was used throughout the Middle Ages. It was used through the Renaissance, and in early modern times, all of the founding fathers of the United States had a copy of the Enchiridion, like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin. All of them had, they carried it with them because it's a sort of very practical thing.
I have one. So like all sorts of great leaders.
Everybody, lots of people have it. Now, the problem with the Enchiridion, however, is that it's a wonderful little book. However, it was, of course, written 18 centuries ago. So there are a few things that have changed in the meantime. Both science in terms of understanding of the world and philosophy in terms of understanding of ethics have made some progress in the meantime. So the idea of the Field Guide to a Happy Life is that it's basically I rewrote the Enchiridion, bringing it up to date, to the 21st century. So the language is modern, the examples are modern, some of the concepts are different. I tried, of course, to stick to Epictetus' original ideas, but I also modified and updated some of those ideas.
And that's part two, you mean, right? But part one is more of an introduction to what it's like. Yes. Part two is the actual content, and then part three is sort of an explanation of how we can take this further and live it in the 21st century.
That's right. The book has a short introduction to Stoicism for people who have no idea what Stoicism is about. The bulk of the book, the central part, is essentially rewriting of the Enchiridion updated to the 21st century. And then the last part details the differences between the original and my version, because I don't want to mislead people. I want people to understand what the differences are and what it is that Epicteto said versus what it is that I'm saying. But this book also is supposed to be very practical. It is supposed to be the kind of thing that you bring with you. That's why it's so short and so little and portable. And you're supposed to. There is a lot of blank space after each section, so that you can write your own notes there. Ideally, people would read it not necessarily cover to cover. You can just open it at a random place, and then start reading it, annotating it, say what write down what you think, and then go back to it over and over.
Well, I'm definitely going to buy a hard copy as soon as I can. I'll order it, and if you could sign it for me, it would be amazing. I would. Or we can talk about that later. So going further in the subject, you consider yourself not only a Stoic or at least that's one of the subjects. A Stoic, in my opinion, I think it's your opinion as well, because I think I heard you say this before. A Stoic isn't a sage, right? A Stoic is somebody who is progressing, who is believing in progress every day. The only commitment to Stoic doesn't have commitment to a certain behavior. A Stoic has a commitment to constantly be improving, right? It's not you should do X, Y, Z, or like it's one of the problems I have with Buddhism. You have to, or with any religion, you have certain prescriptions that are sort of universal. You have to do this and do that, and I think Stoicism is more about becoming a better person. So whatever it is, if it's journaling, meditation, whatever it is, that's a tool for you to arrive at becoming a better person. Yeah,
that's exactly right. So I consider myself a Stoic practitioner, definitely not a sage. The sage is the sage is the perfect Stoic, right? It's the person that has a perfect understanding of virtue and a perfect practice of virtue. And even according to Seneca, sages are very rare. He said that there is one every time that the phoenix comes back to life. The phoenix was this mythological bird that rises from its ashes, and according to Roman mythology, the phoenix rises every 500 years. So there is this one sage every 500 years. I'm certainly not a sage, but yes, we're all practitioners. We're all trying to do better, and there are no commandments. There are no injunctions in Stoicism. The only thing, as you just said, is so long as you're trying your best, you're good, right? So that's what you need to do, is to try your best to become a better person.
Be sincere.
Maybe that's right. Certainly be sincere. Make an effort. I don't know. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what it means to be a better person from a Stoic perspective. There are a couple of different ways of going about it, but one of them is to keep in mind what the Stoics refer to as the four cardinal virtues. So the four virtues are practical wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And practical wisdom is the one that's a little bit more difficult to understand. But essentially, practical wisdom is the knowledge of what is really good for you and what is really not good for you. For the Stoics,
to me, I have a problem distinguishing between temperance and practical wisdom, because in a way, temperance is a form of practical wisdom.
Right. So let's try an example. Let's try an example. So let's say that I go to work and I see one of my coworkers being harassed by my boss. Okay. And so the question that I'm facing now is, well, should I say something or not? Should I intervene in this situation or not? So as a Stoic, I consult my four virtues. Okay. The first one is practical wisdom, which is the knowledge of what is good for me and what is not good for me. And practical wisdom tells me, yes, you should intervene. It's good for your own character to step in because you're doing the right thing. If you don't intervene, you undermine your own character. You become a worse person by not intervening in the situation. So practical wisdom says, yes, you should. Courage. Well, does it take courage to intervene in the situation? Yes, because it's my boss. And so I could face retaliation, right? I could get on his wrong side, or even possibly be, my employment be terminated. So yes, it takes courage. What about justice? Well, justice for the Stoics is acting toward other people in the way in which, in a fair way, and in the way in which you would want them to act toward you. So if I were in the position of my coworker, would I want somebody to take my defense and to step in? Of course I would. So the virtue justice tells me, yes, you should intervene. Now, what about temperance? So temperance is the notion that you should be doing things in the right measure, neither too much nor too little, right? So that means that, for instance, I shouldn't just mutter something under my breath like this so that my boss doesn't hear me, because that's too little. That's just not doing anything. But at the same time, I don't want to jump up on my boss and start punching him on the nose, because that's too much. That's an overreaction, right? So temperance tells me you have to do something in between. You have to speak calmly, firmly, audibly, and so on and so forth. So that's how Stoics, calibrate things. So that's how Stoics, one way in which at least Stoics trying to improve themselves, every time you find yourself in a situation, small or big, consequential or inconsequential, you consult the four virtues and say, okay, according to the four virtues, what should I do under these conditions?
Right. So Massimo, listen, I spent the last few days looking at your YouTube videos. By the way, I'd like to recommend just put in Massimo Pigliucci on YouTube. There's a lot of very concise, very user-friendly, very modern explanations of Stoicism. If you wouldn't mind, I would like to take the conversation in a direction that's, let's say, what I try to do is like this. I try to watch everything that exists, and I didn't have time, because of my circumstances today. I didn't watch every video in YouTube, but I watched a few. But what I try to do is I try to see what you've done, and I try to see like what hasn't been shown yet. Like how can we take this to a deeper level in what I'm personally interested in, but I think other people will be interested in it as well. So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you about like this. You're an atheist, you're an atheist, and you're at least that's what it says on Wikipedia.
Well, the only reason I'm demurring a little bit is because we need to qualify what that means. But go ahead. Ask the question
in general,
and then I'll.
And at the same time, I mean, from the interviews that I see of you, with you, you're not like in the Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins camp. You're more you're skeptical of scientism. Is it what we call? So am I. And also I'm a skeptic, but I'm also into Neoplatonism. I'm into studying different types of mysticism, and I personally think there is value in that. So I think my question to you is like this. Let me try to word it the right way. So one day you talked about like pseudosciences like alchemy and astrology, for example, which led to chemistry and astronomy. And the way that I think modern scientists look at that, and they think like this: people were superstitious, and they were alchemists, and they thought that certain things were true about metals, which weren't really true. Like you can't make lead into gold, right? You can't make lead become gold. But at the same, maybe that's true for a lot of alchemists. But at the same time, there's another aspect of it, which is the virtuous ethics aspect of it, and also the analogy aspect of it. Because in the ancient world, I think we lost a lot of that. Are you familiar with Pierre Grimes?
Not a lot. So go ahead.
Okay. No, he's because I saw that you're part of the American Philosophical Practitioners Association. He was one of the founders of that as well. So I thought anyway.
But I don't know a lot about his work. Yeah.
Right. So he speaks a lot about analogy in ancient Greek, and it's something that I don't see almost anywhere else. So his lectures are quite interesting, and the importance of analogy in ancient Greece. So in ancient Greece and Rome. So for example, alchemy and astrology and all of that. Okay, fine. I mean, the astrology predicting the future. Maybe that's like silly superstition, or actually a little bit of lack of humility. And not understanding really what you know and what you don't know, right? But as well, for example, in astrology, the 12 signs of the zodiac and the interrelation between them is also the forces of the psyche acting together, and each person has a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and we see that in psychology, in especially Jungian psychology, we see a lot of that work going forward, and astrologers were looking at the stars, right? But they weren't looking at the stars for the same reason that astronomers are. Astronomers are looking at the stars because they're trying to create a database of more and more information and trying to go further with that and trying to create practical wisdom in terms of how you use that information. Whereas ancient astrologers, this is all my opinion. You tell me if I'm wrong. But ancient astrologers, to me, were looking at the stars in order to find analogies of these psychological forces and improve themselves and learn about how they themselves worked. And so to them, it was like as above, so below. It was like whatever we see in the stars, we see in ourselves, and we see in nature and things like that. So my question to you is, a long question. Also, the same thing with alchemists. Turning lead into gold. You're trying to turn yourself into a sage, right? That's really the point of alchemy. Everything else is an experiment that is trying. It's an analogy to make it get there. And of course, during that process, people stumbled upon real chemistry, real astronomy. So my question to you is: did we at least throw some of the baby off with the water? Is there some of that? Did we lose with astronomy and with chemistry? Did we lose some of the analogy and some of the?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. So let me start by going back to the beginning of your comment about I'm an atheist and yet I'm not the Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins kind of atheist. So what does that mean? I take atheism in the original etymological sense of the word atheist. Atheist means without a positive belief in God, right? So an atheist is not somebody who knows that there is no God, because nobody really knows, right? I mean, it's like, what do I know?
Except for Richard Dawkins.
Right, except for Richard Dawkins. But an atheist is somebody who says, look, I'm going to provisionally accept only things for which there is empirical evidence. And if there is no empirical evidence, I'm just going to say, I don't believe it for now until and if the situation actually changes. So one analogy that I like to use often is I'm an atheist in the same way in which I am a unicornist. I don't believe in unicorns. Now, it's not that I don't believe in unicorns because I searched the entire universe and I discovered that there are no unicorns, right? It's possible that there are unicorns on a distant planet on another galaxy. Who knows? But so far as we know, there are no unicorns. And so right now, my thinking is I'm not going to believe it. Should the situation change, should somebody present me with a unicorn, then I'll revise my opinion. That, I think, is a difference between my position and the so-called new atheism. New atheism is very brush. It's very self-assured. I'm not that self-assured. This is simply what I believe on the basis of my understanding of the situation and the facts and the arguments, but that situation can change. Also, unlike the new atheists, I don't think that religion is the root of all evil, as this is a famous phrase from Richard Dawkins, right?
Right.
Religion certainly has been and still is the root of some evil, for sure, but it's also the root of a lot of good, right? I mean, for every crusades and every inquisition that we can bring up, there is also a lot of hospitals, charitable work, and the people are helping other people. So I don't think that. I think that religion is a little bit more complicated than just a black or white situation, and therefore, if it works for some people, by all means. One of the reasons I like Stoicism, for instance, is because I do think of it as a big tent from that perspective. If you're an atheist or an agnostic, you can be a Stoic. But if you are,
it doesn't require religion, right?
No.
Stoicism doesn't require that.
Right. It doesn't require religion, but it also doesn't exclude it. So if you are a religious
Right,
person,
right.
you can still be a Stoic. And I think that is actually...
And in my opinion, the Stoics were actually quite pious. You know, in general,
Yeah, that's right.
they go out of their ways to talk about the gods and.
Absolutely. Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus in particular, they were definitely pious. Although they believed in their own version of God. They were pantheists from a modern perspective, but nevertheless.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to say about atheism. Now, about the other things that you brought up. Look, did we throw the baby out with the bathwater? Perhaps. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? So the question is this: modern science is working very well for what it tries to do. If the goal is to understand the natural world, then chemistry, biology, physics, astronomy, and all that sort of stuff, that's definitely the way to go. I mean, we've learned much more about how the world works through science than we've ever learned through any other approaches or any other way of doing things. Now, people make an argument, however, that but science doesn't give you spirituality. Science doesn't give you, meaning, doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. And that's true. But then again, I also think it's a little bit unfair to ask that of science. That's just, science is not in the business of providing you spirituality and meaning. That is the business of religion but that's, or philosophy.
All right, but that's virtue and meaning. But I'm actually speaking about the virtue ethics part of it. You know, if you look at the alchemist's work, and this was always the inner sense. You know, if you look at Paracelsus or something like that, if you look in between the lines, they're clearly speaking in terms of self-development and virtue ethics. And I'm not talking about spirituality. I mean, there is some of spirituality as well. The thing is, in those days, things weren't divorced. You know, there wasn't. You're looking at the physical world. It's just about like what the purpose is. Why am I studying the physical world, right? So in Stoicism, we ask each other that question, right? So why am I looking at this microscope, right? And for an alchemist, he would be looking at it so that he could find an analogy for his soul and understand his soul better and understand how to become a soul of gold, right? Yep. So nowadays, because we divorced that, nowadays people just look at a microscope, and that's my problem with it. So I actually have a problem with that divorce. I understand that there was a lot of superstition, and there really was, but the center of it was the motivation behind it. The motivation was we're looking at the stars, we're looking at the microscope because we're trying to become better human beings, and we stopped doing that.
Correct. However, there are different ways of trying to become a human being, right? So one of which is the one you're talking about, for sure. And again, if it works for some people, I mean, whatever works, especially when it comes to becoming a better person. If adopting analogies that come out of alchemy or analogies that come out of Jungian psychology is helpful to somebody, by all means. I mean, who am I to say no? However, there is a problem. The problem there is that people a little too often sort of miss the distinction between an analogy or a useful metaphor and a statement of fact. For instance, I know a number of people who are interested in Jungian psychology, just to give you an example, who actually think that the notion of archetype is a scientifically established notion. It isn't. So if thinking in terms of archetypes helps you, with meaning in your life and helps you, become...
It's a paradigm. It's just a way of looking at things, right?
Right. If it is a way of looking at things, go for it. However, if you then on top of that say, oh, and by the way, we should base the psychological science on the notion of archetypes because that's a scientific fact. It's like, well, no, wait a minute, hold on. There actually, I'm not gonna follow you because there is no evidence, no empirical evidence that is a reasonable notion. That's one way to look at it. The other way of looking at it, going back to virtue ethics, is that sure, some people get to virtue ethics or to improvement of character in general by the kinds of ways that you're talking about, but some people don't. Like, for instance, as a Stoic, I don't need to take on board almost any of these kind of non-pre-scientific notions. I just say, okay, whatever the ancients believed, whatever Epictetus believed, whatever Marcus Aurelius believed, etc., that was their best effort at the time, 2,000 years ago.
Right.
Now we believe different things, but from a point of view of character, I can still use the Stoics' approach to things. I can still use the four virtues. I can still use the way in which they were thinking about human improvement and human character, and it still works for me, right?
Right.
So there are different. All I'm saying, I guess, is there are different ways to look at the problem. If the problem is, how do I become a better human being?
Right. Person. Yeah. So I think just to add to that, the thing is, like, as you also said in an interview, we, even with science nowadays, we know for sure that we're going to be wrong, about most things, and in a few years we're gonna know something different, right? So yes. Marcus Aurelius thought wrong certain things, and Epictetus thought wrong certain things, and that's all right because he was living in that time, and we discovered different things, and that's perfectly natural. That's part of the human experience and wisdom in general. I think what the main ingredient is that I'm trying to say here is the Marcus Aurelius, even though he was wrong, when he was wrong, he was trying to coincide. He was trying to integrate what he believed in, what he saw, and what he saw in the natural world with a cosmic, pantheistic, like everything is connected, sort of explanation. So, which included his virtue ethics. So that's why you can derive from metals and the way that they transmute and this and that what works in the soul, because you have a cosmic approach to life. Everything is the same. Everything is analogous, and that's how you arrive at things. I think nowadays with science, what happened is that we created these branches and we stopped looking at the world cosmically. And
that's true. Yeah, that's true. That is a good point. I mean, but to some extent, that was sort of inevitable, because the problem is, I can tell you this as both a professional scientist and a professional philosopher, right? So here's the thing: if you wanna publish, if you want to have an academic career, you have to publish papers and books, technical papers and books. I'm talking not for the general public, right? That means you have to come up with something new that nobody's ever said before, right? And after literally 2,400 years of philosophy, and after at least 4 or 5 centuries of science, it's kind of difficult to come up with something new to say. And so people become more and more specialized. People get to spend their entire career looking at very tiny little things, very tiny aspects of either biology or physics or even philosophy, for that matter, right? That's just the name of the game. That's just unavoidable. As a side effect, unfortunately, that does have the kind of side effect you're talking about, that is, people miss the big picture. In fact, one of my favorite quotes is from, or passages, is from Einstein, who wrote a letter to a friend of his back in the 1930s, I believe, where he said, look, the problem is, I see a lot of my colleagues, scientists, who become so specialized and they ignore the big picture. They ignore, in fact, philosophy, he said. He was complaining about the fact that physicists were ignoring philosophy. And he said, what that turns them into is good practitioners, good technicians, but not good thinkers, right? Because they're missing the big picture. So there is something to be said for that, absolutely, which is why people need to step back from time to time and do take a look at the big picture. Yeah,
and that's what Stoicism prescribes. It says, like, before you're doing something, ask yourself, why are you doing it, right? So why the hell are you looking at the stars, and why do we want to know, if there's a supernova somewhere in the galaxy? We have to ask ourselves that, and if that doesn't connect to a higher purpose. And when I say higher purpose, it doesn't have to be God. It can be like, secular humanism. It can be anything. If it isn't, something like that, then really, why are we doing it? And it became a sort of automatic, sort of glory-seeking game, By the way, that's something I see. That's very, very authentic in you. You're knee deep into, or the head deep into academia. Like, you have a lot of PhDs. You have a PhD collection, and yet you keep yourself very, very humble. And not only that, you're not actually your main concern is Stoicism, and I can see that that's very honest, which isn't what you have a PhD in.
That's right, exactly. I mean, the funny thing in all this is that I've been publishing books and papers and articles and all that for literally decades, right? But and I had fun doing that. It was interesting and all that sort of stuff. But since I got into Stoicism, actually, this is where I started making a difference in people's lives, right? So when I was writing about biology, yes, exactly. When I was writing about biology or even pseudoscience for that matter, it was interesting. It was an interesting intellectual exercise. But I doubt that that's changed anybody's lives. On the other hand, since I published How to Be a Stoic, and then a number of other books, as we were saying earlier, lots of articles, I did a little bit of a count the other day, and by my rough estimate is that if you go to my blogs where you find so my free stuff, basically, I wrote the equivalent of like 12 books in terms of word count over the last 6 years about Stoicism, and it was very rewarding. It has been very rewarding because not only I have fun, of course, doing it. That's if I love it. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it, right? Number one. Number two, it has changed my life. It has helped me through the midlife crisis that we were talking about at the beginning. It still helps me with my friends, with my wife. You might have seen her in the background going up and down because dinner is almost ready. So she's taking a look at the pasta sauce over here. So not only has helped me personally, but I get constantly letters or emails from people who read my books or my article or something, and they tell me, this was really helpful. Sometimes this changed my life, the big picture. In other cases, this was helpful. And it's very rewarding to see that something that you're doing, that you're writing, that you're putting out there is actually genuinely helpful to people. You're making it possible for people to live a slightly better life or slightly more conscious life than they were before, and it's great. This is something for which I'm very grateful.
And your fans are also very grateful. I'd like to say our time is up. I know your dinner is probably waiting for you there. And also Instagram, I think, stopped saying that we're good enough for them because a lot of people left. But I'd like to thank you again for participating. I don't think I think we covered like maybe 2 questions that I wrote here, but that's fine. There's maybe like 100 more. But let's end. Just I wanted to say a few things just so people can have it registered for the podcast. So you still have the Rationally Speaking podcast going on?
No, the Rationally Speaking podcast is going on, but I'm not a co-host anymore.
But you're not part of it.
My friend Julia Galef is doing it. Yeah, my podcast is the one you mentioned in the beginning.
Yes,
the Stoic Meditations. Yeah.
Okay, so everybody listen to Stoic medications. Stoic. That's a good one.
They are kind of medication.
So listen to Stoic meditations. I do so every day in the morning, and it like truly helps. It's like less than like 5 minutes long, something like that. You take. So it's something, it's very quick. It's like an injection. It starts your day, and it's also. I mean, he doesn't. It's not what do you call it? It's not superficial. You go, you go into different works and different people. Masonius Rufus, all sorts of. Is that right? Masonius Rufus, his name.
Masonius Rufus, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So also go check out Twitter at Pigliucci, and that's your main like social network, right? That you use.
That is my main social network, and then everything else that I do gets posted or linked to massimopigliucci.com.
Okay, so that's it. www.massimopigliucci.com, and you also provide like part of the APPA philosophical counseling. Are you still doing that?
Yes, I'm doing that. In fact, I've seen since the beginning of the pandemic, I've seen actually an increase in the number of people that want some kind of philosophical counseling to deal with whatever situation they find themselves in right now. Yeah.
Great. So I definitely recommend that. I haven't done that myself, but let's talk about that. I feel that would be an interesting approach.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, please tell me.
Oh, I was gonna say it is. I think it is an interesting approach. It's a colleague of mine refers to it as therapy for the sane. That is, if you have a mental issue, a serious issue like a clinical depression or bipolar disorder or something like that, you don't go to a philosopher, you go to a psychologist, obviously, or to a psychiatrist. But the thing is, even after you take a pill or do therapy and that sort of stuff, and you come back to some kind of normal life, you still have life problems. You still have issues about career, relationships, friendship, and all that sort of stuff. And those are, in fact, philosophical issues, and that's where philosophical counseling comes in.
Right. All right. So check all of that out. I think the most important one is MassimoPigliucci.com. That's where you can find links to everything else.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Massimo. It's a great pleasure to be with you, and I hope we can do this again sometime and go deeper into different subjects, and it'll be great.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All the best. Bye-bye. Enjoy your food.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.